says that Pete's going to be late, but I see him here. So I hope that just means he's at least listening. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we need to do, though, is find a note taker. Can somebody take notes in the Etherpad, please?
Russ, I'll try to do my best here. I have to say I'm having some trouble with HedgeDoc on my system, though. So it may be good. I just tried to open it up, and actually it's pretty grim for me. So maybe you need to pick somebody else until I can figure this out.
Okay. Can somebody else do it, please? I'm hoping that somebody will put their hand up besides Elliot.
Okay, I'm in there now.
Okay.
Looks like Robert's helping out a little bit here too. So,
okay,
but I'll see if I can take more.
All right, cool. All right, so we have a pretty straightforward agenda. We're in the middle of the working group last call on 7990 updates. It's been very lively discussion, and I'm going to ask the authors in a minute to lead us through the open issues that they see, and then if there's any time left, we'll turn to the not ASCII document. That's basically been pushed to the back burner over 7990, but is next in our attention. I do want to remind people that while this group is not part of the IETF or is not an IETF working group, we are following the note well for the IETF, so please make sure that you know what your rights, privileges, and responsibilities are regarding the note well. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Paul, I think, to lead through the open issues.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. The chairs didn't ask us to be leading this. I did not know that you were going to ask us to do that. So I will give a brief overview of where I think we're at, and then other people will probably say what they think the open issues are. So the chair started the working group last call a little bit ago. We got, as Russ said, lots of good participation. Heather's not on the call. Heather and I put in lots of changes for the easy stuff, especially editorial. We made guesses on what we thought would be non-controversial and put those in as well. And I put out yesterday roll-ups of what we've done so far on 04. We asked whether the chairs want us to do a 05 with all the roll-ups. During the last call, we haven't had much response on that, and I think that's fine. We're happy to continue to do roll-ups. We're happy to do an 05 during the working group last call, whatever the chairs want. There are a couple of issues where some people have come back multiple times saying this is important, and have not gotten much other input from other people. So I believe those should be considered open issues, but I don't have a way of moving it forwards. I don't want to ask people, do you consider this important? People either feel like things are important or not. One of those is from Jay Daly on adding a bunch of new actual definitions because he got confused about the use of the term version in the document. I fixed the individual, or we fixed the individual places where he said he was confused, and that's reflected in the roll-up. We may still want to do more definitions or not. There is a little bit of discussion, I wouldn't say super active, but on the removal of the prohibition on comments. Martin Durst, who is on the call today, responded to that. I've responded, folks have responded. And there are probably other issues that I am not thinking of, and I apologize to whomever if I have ignored your issue. But we haven't seen much discussion. And again, please, if you think something's important, please start a new thread. It's really hard with various threading to figure out for people to follow what's important and what's not. So we're happy to do whatever the working group wants on either put out an 05 or do another roll up on issues such as Jay's. I don't want to just go ahead and throw that stuff in because that's like a major change throughout. But if the working group comes to consensus as determined by the chairs that that's what should go in, we can certainly do that. We can do it carefully as a change that, like a set of changes saying, is this what people expected, sort of as a roll up. And then if that works out, okay, that's back. Elliot actually also put something in today, which would affect a bunch of individual places in the document, specifically around the like when we're updating 9280, we should be saying explicitly where that's happening and exactly how. I know that 9280 is a hot topic for certain people, so that may be also one, but that just came up today, so we haven't had much movement on it. So that's all I've got. Y'all didn't ask for slides, so I didn't do slides. So back to you, Russ.
Fair enough. I did not ask for slides, but I did tell you this would be the first topic. And some things have been discussed right up to the call. But I note that Martin proposed a different terminology than Jay, and I think that would be a good thing to sort out if people have opinions on that. Robert, go ahead. Robert, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. I was talking into a muted mic. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So apologies for interrupting. Paul asked several times if an 05 would serve better than on-list roll-ups. And I'd like to put a vote in for revising early and often. Revisions during working group last call, I think for a group of this size and for the topics that we're working on, I think would be constructive and not a distraction.
Does anybody want to disagree with Robert? Okay, I'm not hearing that anyone disagree. So, Paul, please, post something, and I could totally understand holding off on a big terminology change until there's consensus. But on the other ones that you're ready to commit, go ahead and post them.
Sure. It will be the roll-up, plus there is one pull request waiting on Heather, and I'll give it another day. Since we put out the roll-up yesterday, I don't think we're in a super rush, but we're happy to do an 05. And if as we're doing this, people are like, no, this is wrong, we can stop. But I'm happy to do an 05 in the short run.
Okay, we've seen several plus ones in the chat for the posting of 05. Robert, you're still in the queue. Is that an old hand? Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This is really a point that may be obvious, but I don't want to see us declare final rough consensus on this unless we've heard from both the tools side of the house and the RPC side of the house that there is nothing they can't live with, if you see what I mean. Because, you know, if it can't be implemented, whatever it is, we shouldn't be approving it.
Okay, good point, and we will reach out to them explicitly before we make the consensus call at the end of the working group last call. And I hope they will join the discussion if they see anything that is problematic. Paul?
So two things on what Brian just said. I would add a third, which would be, it would be great if the stream managers would also weigh in. I don't think we can ask the RSAB as a body to weigh in, but, or at least for the stream managers to say, we've seen this and we don't see anything that can't be done. Some of the stream managers have different views on what can and can't be done. So that would be helpful so that we don't get a late surprise from the RSAB.
I was kind of presuming, given that they are, for the most part, actively participating, that we'd hear from them one way or the other. But
fair.
The chairs pinging them directly is probably a good thing.
I think so, for the same reason as, you know, we see Robert here, but we can't assume tools and such like that. You know, we see folks from the RPC, we can't assume that. I don't think pings are inappropriate for please tell us whether we should stop. I also would like to say that even if I've done an 05 and or 06, and I'm sorry, I keep saying me, but it's Heather and I. And the working group last call finishes, I wouldn't mind a second working group last call on the last thing. It might be a short one and it might be for objections only. But given that we've already changed a bunch, and I suspect that we'll have at least one or two more significant changes before the end of work group last call, having everybody read it fresh. I mean, we certainly have seen some people having not read the 04 that carefully and remembering the 03. Totally fine. I do that all the time in the technical working groups. A fresh, possibly short working group last call, I think would not hurt us at all.
Well, we've already heard today a scream for it's not done. So I don't think we're in danger of that just yet, but we will make sure that people are aware that when we think the document has become stable and we're getting there, to make sure they have an opportunity to scream if there's something remaining. Paul, is that an old hand? Okay, Eric.
Yeah, I don't want to be too sticky on the process question, and I'm happy to have us ping all these people, but there is a venue for them to object, and that is the RSAB. And so I don't think we should wait on the responses beyond a reasonable period of time.
Fair enough. I think we just need to say, hey, it's getting stable. Would you make sure you've taken a look?
That seems fine.
Okay. Elliot?
Hello, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thanks to Paul and Heather for taking on this document. It's a bit of a learning experience all around, right? We're learning our processes still, I think, and we're having to understand what it is we approved in 9280, and how this document relates to that document. I'm one of those people who's being a bit of a stickler about that. What I want to say a couple of things about that. The first is that 9280 calls upon the stream managers, just as Paul said, to participate. For exactly the reason Paul said. This was brought up in the development of that document repeatedly, often by me, but others as well. The other comment that I wanted to make was that I too am interested in the RPC evaluation of, or at least the interpretation of what they're being asked to do, so that we're at least of the same mind as to what will happen when this document is approved. Finally, I'm also the person who, when Paul said that I asked that we call out 9280 changes specifically, the ones that I think are most important are actually the ones that impact the what are called the historical policies in section 7 of 9280. In that document, it says right in the chapeau of that section that these are the things that we should give extra scrutiny to, which, by the way, is a frustrating thing if you happen to be an author and you're trying to get the work actually through the process. So let's acknowledge that. But there are, as I mentioned, I think there are two things going on there. The first is that we are explicitly making a change to we are making a change to section 7.6, which talks about how RFCs don't change once published. And so I think we should basically do what we do in the, in an RFC or something like that, where we say, in Auth 48, where we say old, new, or was, will be, or something like that. And then the other thing we're doing is we are, I believe, implicitly at the moment, but perhaps should be explicitly adding a new policy, which is about consistency of the series being a good reason to update existing RFCs. So these are things that I think should be called out a little bit more explicitly in terms of what was changed and what's new. And I think using that sort of framework that we have in section 7 of 9280 is actually a good one. But it might also be the case if we decided to make changes in section 3 or other places of 9280, we would do the same thing. The other thing that means too, though, if we're really only changing section 7, is that we don't have to go to the other bodies as described in the rather lengthy change process. So anyway, thanks very much again for taking on the document. Sorry, my comments are a bit long.
Okay, I don't see anyone in the queue. Yes, Elliot's voice was coming and going, but I was able to figure out what he was saying. Did anybody else? Does anyone need him to repeat anything? Okay, so we're good. Are there any other hot topics that people would like to discuss that have already been posted on the mail list or not? Jay?
Thanks. Well, we could just, if we've got the time, since it looks like we have, talk about the my concern that Paul's already talked about. Would you like me to do that, or do you want to?
Yes, especially if you're going to cover Martin's perspective or your response to Martin's perspective.
I don't fully understand Martin's perspective, so no, I can't do that.
Okay.
Yet.
Okay.
But mine is very, very simple. RFC 7990 says at the very front of it, the canonical format of the RFC series will be transitioning from plain text ASCII to XML using blah blah blah. Okay, so we have this thing called a canonical format, and when we go under this new draft, we have no way to refer to RFC XML as either canonical format, definitive format, or anything like that. The only term that I can see that is consistent with this new draft is the format of the definitive version. So all I'm suggesting is that we add a very simple definition that says RFC or there is a thing called a definitive format. It is RFC XML. There are things called publication formats. They are PDF, plain text, could be more. That's all. That's literally just the smallest thing there that I'm trying to do, because then that clears up all of the potential misunderstanding that can come from the language that talks about what can be changed and what can't be changed.
Okay, responses to what, go ahead, Paul.
So Jay, if that's all you're asking for, I misunderstood. I thought you wanted those two new definitions sprinkled throughout the document and used whenever, for example, we were talking about RFC XML. If you just want to say somewhere at the top, this is and again, everyone agreed months ago that we don't like canonical, but definitive format for the series, and then not have to keep saying that throughout when we're talking about.
No reason to keep saying it whatsoever.
I have no problem with that at all. What I didn't want was to have to be sprinkling all the new stuff throughout. Other folks might have comments on this, but I think that's just fine. And that gives us an opportunity, which we tried to work with. I think it was either the 00 or the 01, and then we just gave up, of trying to explain, to say that 7990 muffed this by having two different definitions. We can now then say that in a place and say, this one has now become this, and this one has now become this, and do that, like, probably I would say up in the introduction.
Yeah, I've provided text for that.
You did, but I thought you wanted that text throughout the document.
No, that's just the it's just a change in the definitions that fixes it.
I am happy with that if other folks are as well.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry if I made it very complicated to understand that through the messages.
Robert, go ahead.
When Jay's second definition about the publication formats goes in anywhere in the documents that we're working on that we list text, HTML, PDF, please be careful to word it as such as text, HTML, PDF, so that we don't have a list that we have to clean up if we ever have a new format come along or we decide to drop one.
Okay, Pete?
Yeah, I just want to speak hatless to one thing that was in Jay's comment that I want us to be careful of. Please, let's avoid using the words human readable. I know what Jay meant, but that's just going to open up a rat hole and people are going to start complaining about silliness, because PDF is not human readable for some version of those words. So let's come up with presentation format or some other way of describing what those are, publication formats, etc. But human readable is not what we want.
Humanely readable. Eric, go ahead.
So maybe I'm starting to misunderstand what Jay wanted and maybe think I want something bigger, which is, I think it's great. I think it's actually super important to have a distinction between the format, which is to say XML, and a document in that format, or which is which is say specific RFC.XML, and the same thing true for text and PDF. And if the document, if we merge those in the document anywhere, they should be disambiguated with new terms. So I guess maybe. So I'm a little concerned about what I thought I heard Jay and Paul talking about, because I thought Jay was right initially, and now I'm worried.
Can I explain
Absolutely, please do.
Thanks. And so no, the document has a term definitive versions, which is documents in a definitive format. It's just missing the definitive format bit. So we're talking about adding that so you get the differentiation between the two terms.
Okay, that seems reasonable to me. As long as we make sure that that's used, consistently to the document where needed.
And I've remembered what Martin's point was as well, by the way.
Yes, his is the archive point. I was going to raise it.
And I guess I wanted to quickly ask Paul, do you believe from that discussion that we just had that you understand what text needs to go in? Or do you want more?
I do, but this is an example where I would like to do things in the GitHub repo. That is, I'll say on the list, I think this pull request is what we want, simply because it'll be in a couple of places. So my intention is to come up with that wording. I might do the 05 first, just so that we've got that going, but come up with that wording, clear it with Heather, and then send out a pull request, or say
yeah,
to the
or
list.
just a comment to the list. I think that sounds fine. Get rolled into 05 what seems easy now, and then if you've still got some concerns about how you're going to word this, put a proposal out on the list. That's fine.
Exactly. And again, I think for things where a individual issue has touched many parts of the document, somebody looking at the diff and the pull request is a lot easier than me saying and here and here. So in dealing with Elliot's issue, I think that will be a similar situation.
That's fine.
So let me summarize Martin's point that Jay was just talking about, that at any one moment, there is only one definitive version of the RFC and the others are superseded. And he called them archived. But I don't care what word we use, but we need to come up with something that addresses that distinction, I believe.
Can I just say, Russ, the problem with Martin's is that you then end up with the archived definitive versions and the definitive version.
I understand. That's why I said superseded previously definitive versions or something.
We will make a run at this, and I expect us not to get it right the first time, but I think with people looking at diffs and just looking at the diffs, we'll get some thoughtful thinking on this. The wording here is definitely going to be important because going back to the concern that some people have of, ooh, the lawyers, when a lawyer says, show me the thing, we can say this is the thing and this is the things that were before the thing. And it would be nice if we had vocabulary that made those reasonably different.
Or at least clear.
Yeah,
Sorry.
And if you want to propose text, with different terminology that you think will separate that cleanly, go ahead. Just I'll
make one shot, and if people want to wordsmith on the one shot, I don't consider wordsmithing here to be bike shedding at all. I consider this to be fairly important.
This is meaningful. By the way, Russ, there was some comment in the chat that you are overdriving your mic a bit.
Okay, I'll turn that back.
We have no one in the queue at the moment.
I guess Robert wanted to tell me that.
Yeah, I did, but I'll go ahead and jump in the queue now to have a real quick conversation with Eric. You had asked Eric for me to give an example of the concerns that I had about managing a pile of documents. Speaking of the archive things, when we're staring at these as a well-groomed and ordered set of things as we're defining them right now, yeah, sure, it's dead easy and we can move. but I'm looking at what we've done with a great many other things like this in the past. And I'll point to the proceedings for all of the past IETF meetings and how time and technology has changed how we gather those, and managing the pile is it's just proving to not be as easy as it looked like it was going to be from the front. And I was just wanting to make sure that people kept in mind that there is a cost to keeping every extra thing that we keep.
I hope my microphone's doing better. Eric, I assume you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but like, I think that's because the information architecture of the previous stuff is not designed very well. We have like, I mean, we have like experience with like version control systems which can handle tens to hundreds of thousands of files with like thousands of versions each for like 10, 20 years. And so like, if we can't manage, and like those have like on 1 year history, they have merges, they have all kinds of nutty stuff. And it's the idea that we can't like handle like, 10,000 documents, each of which has maybe 20 revisions. I mean, like, we got to be able to design an information architecture for that, or how can we hook to the internet?
Yeah, I like this, and I would like to see that if we make a pile like this, that we consider something like putting things under some sort of version control. But conversations about that in the past have been, oh no, that's just way too heavy and unnecessary. Let's just stick some stick some dates in the file names, and everything is great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think version control is the right answer. Thank you.
I suspect that Brian wants to respond to that. If you do, please get in the queue. Paul?
So as somebody who's employed by a fairly public-facing organization who has screwed up the just stick dates on the end and keep the old URLs around and no one can tell what the new one is, yeah, we absolutely need version control, even if when someone says, oh, I don't understand version control, I want this or this, we have to do some hand-holding. That is infinitely better than doing it by dates or things like that. And I say this as someone who just had to like, when someone said, oh, look at this document that ICANN published, it seems out of date. And the answer is, yeah, it is out of date. Unfortunately, you just didn't have an easy way of finding the new one.
Okay, Jay?
Thanks. So there's one thing about the archiving that I've mentioned some time ago, but it hasn't picked up that concerns me, and that's the phrase, these archived sets must be available using the same access methods as for the XML and the published publication versions. I'd been good if we had some more understanding of that, because it seems to suggest they need to be, sort of in the same place, easily accessible. Whereas what we're talking about potentially here is that the archive stuff goes off somewhere else and is in a separate archive and accessible in some other way.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I keep going on about timestamps is we don't even have that today, right? I'm absolutely in favor of a version control system. There's no doubt about it. But if you don't even have a timestamp in the ancient documents, you can't even retrofit version control. So that's the only reason I keep going on about it.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do think this needs to be accessible. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the same mechanism means or whatever like that really means, but like, like I think what we owe people is that when you go and you look at version 20 of this document, you're able to readily determine version 19, like using the same like rough technology, which I think means like if it's on the web, it means there better be a link that like takes you to 19 off of 20. And so you can see what happened between 19 and 18, 19 and 20, whatever, right? Otherwise, like that's what we owe people, right? And like I could live with anything about that. Carson says sequential numbering, whatever. Like I'm just saying, like you shouldn't have to like. I said version control, and I think version control is the right answer for like keeping the data in place. But like you shouldn't have to like git pull the repository in order to like figure out what happened between version 1 and version 2.
Okay, Elliot, and then Alexis.
All right, I'll try to speak slower and hopefully you'll hear me better. I don't know. I was just thinking that we're probably to the point where somebody needs to propose whatever textual change to cover what we're talking about here, if it whatever version control means in the context of a policy. I feel like we're a little bit in the woods in terms of working out every last bit in terms of how we do this. So that would be my suggestion is let's see a PR.
Go ahead, Alexis.
So I guess two things. One, I think that the most important thing is to have the current definitive version be available at the same URL always. So that is the way that people know that they are looking at the current version. I don't have any objection to people's suggestions necessarily about, is it in Git? Is it versioned? Is it date stamped? Is it whatever? Because I don't think we have a solid proposal. But I would advocate for not trying to put that proposal into this document. I think that that is overloading the document.
I take what you said to mean, Alexis, that it's okay to put in a general, call it, I don't know, theory of revision control into the document, maybe some functional description, but not specifics about what all the bells and whistles and knobs are going to be. Correct?
I guess what I was saying was I would definitely not mind seeing something in the document that says the definitive version, or sorry, the definitive current version will always be available at X, but I would avoid trying to put in any implementation details of how things are archived, because I don't think that we have a clear idea of what we want there, and I wouldn't want us to box ourselves in before we've had that conversation. So I think it should stay out of this document.
Good. Robert?
Yeah, I totally agree. The mentioning version control in the document's not the right thing to do, but there was a question about clarifying, what it means to be the same mechanism. And I think that just points to some wordsmithing that needs to happen to say that something along the lines of it should be easy to find these things when you have found the primary thing.
And I'm sorry, Brian, were you still in the queue or just left over from last time? Given the speed at which you're finding your mute button. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other last call issues that somebody wants to raise while we're all gathered? Go ahead, Martin.
Well, I think Paul mentioned the issue about comments. So we could discuss that shortly if somebody wants to. I wrote yesterday that, as far as I remember, we disallowed comments in the original or final or definitive or whatever XML because it essentially hides information, because the information doesn't show up in the publication versions, in the HTML, the plain text, the PDF, and so on. That's my understanding, and that would suggest that we continue to do that, but well, we should probably discuss it now.
Okay, Looks like Paul and John want to both respond. So Paul first.
So I don't want to respond because we have already had discussion about this on the mailing list after your comment, Martin. So maybe you haven't caught up, but a few people have responded differently. So I don't think this is the best use of our time, but let's keep it going on the mailing list.
Okay.
Okay, John.
Well, given that comment from Paul, I think I agree with Paul. But if the argument against comments is information which is hidden in the publication formats, that becomes an argument against any data at all in that RFC XML file that is purely metadata, doesn't appear in any of the output formats, and I don't think we want to go there.
Martin, you want to respond to that?
Well, I think there's a difference between well-defined metadata and just comments that could be anything, but yeah.
Of course, there's a difference, but if the argument is nothing should appear in the RFC XML file, which doesn't appear in the publication formats, a position which parenthetically I would agree with, but I think I lost that argument years ago, then that's not a very strong argument for excluding comments. But per Paul's comment, I'm more than happy to just back the mailing list if anybody else cares to discuss it further.
Sounds like a good place for it.
Okay, so assuming John's not raising a new hand, I think we've finished that one. Are there any other issues on the last call document that people want to talk about? Go ahead, Jay.
Hi, me again. As we're here, so the appendix, the advice in the appendix, the particular bit that I have raised multiple times is the ability to test whether regeneration produces the same result for example, if there is a new mechanism to generate an output, the advice says that it should be run and tested to see whether it will produce the same result. For certain formats, I agree that that's possible, such as plain text, but for PDF, I think it is just impossible. RPC have done some tests with some PDF diff tools, and even something slight gives a difference there. And with HTML, it's, in my view, equally complicated as well, because we may expect lots of things to change without the content changing. And so I'm just not sure why we need that advice in there. It seems to me just excessive for this document to include that, given the problems that exist with it.
Eric?
I guess I'm sort of not following. Like, is malpractice not to do this? Like, if you have a tool that generates stuff and you don't check that it generates the right stuff, I don't understand like how you know the tool works. And I just observed like web browsers do this. Like, this is like how a web browser is tested. Is we have like reference tests, so we like verify that like stuff on the page looks like the way it's supposed to look. So like I just don't understand like how do you if we're not going to do this, how do we know the tools aren't like completely busted?
There's a trade-off here between the level of effort for testing that we have a correct system versus the amount of times it will be used. And so for PDFs, if somebody can point to a technology or point to a tool that can accurately determine whether two PDFs, the content has changed or not through different revisions of the generation mechanism, then please let's do that. But everything I've seen is that when somebody changes a PDF library to update it, and you generate out the same thing as you did before, you get a slight difference that is going to be detected by a tool, but is not actually relevant to the content of that PDF.
well, then we should be checking for bitwise editability in the identical in the output, like like when it renders on the page, the actual pixels are the same.
The actual pixels are the same, so that if there's a slight increase in spacing or something like that, this is not. I don't think this is a simple, easy problem.
But I don't understand. How do you know it's not totally generating like total nonsense? Like this is just a software testing question.
No, the point is that when this is a routine that is only used under specific circumstances to regenerate something. It is a manual process to regenerate, and it is something that will then be, when we're actually doing it live, I mean, okay? So when it's being done live, it's a manual process and it will be manually checked and manually understood. Having to have that a fully automatable process that can be done across a large set of files is unnecessary in the context of the way we publish things.
I don't agree.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, let's get some other views. Alexis and then Elliot.
Yeah, mainly, I guess I'm speaking in favor of Jay's point of view on this. It's too high of a bar, I think, is the point. The point is not that we shouldn't check and that we shouldn't try to validate things. It's that the way it's written right now creates a bar that is higher than we think we can actually achieve right now. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't try to achieve whatever bar, but until or unless we see an actual tool that will allow us to do this to PDFs, I don't think it's reasonable to put it in the document. Putting in some sort of, and they will check a subset of documents to see if anything obvious breaks, sure, but like continuous validation or it's not an achievable bar. That is the problem.
Elliot and then Jean.
Hey, take Gene first, okay? I'll wait.
All right. I will be sending some examples of what a PDF diff looks like. It's an RFC generated by two slightly different versions of XML to RFC. We are trying, in this instance, we were wanting to fix a nested list mistake, and the amount of garbage that the diff shows makes it very difficult for anyone to figure out. And if you're looking at this diff, you go, wow, this document is greatly changed, but it's not. So if anybody has diff tools for PDFs that they know about that are provide useful diffs, please send that information this way. Thanks.
Okay, Elliot and then Eric.
Okay. First, it was great to hear your voice there, Gene. I think all of this discussion reinforces the point that Brian and I made, and so I want to reiterate that. It's really important that we hear from the RPC about how they will interpret the work, what we're saying in this RFC, and how they will implement it. So, for instance, and the one that we all have slightly different concerns about that, I'm sure. How will the RPC interpret Section 3 or Section 2.1, right? In terms of when they're going to regenerate, will they tend to regenerate always for changes to the grammar, or what under what circumstances do they view, how, or will there be a trade-off? How will they manage the trade-off? Some thoughts around that I think would be very, very helpful.
Maybe let's try to take this in pieces. So what's the object? Like, let's take the text first. Is there any reason the text can't be compared mechanically? The TXT.
No, text is no problem. It's not.
Great.
Yep.
So why can't the HTML be compared mechanically?
Sorry, say that again, please.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about the HTML. Why can't the HTML be verified mechanically?
I don't know enough about that to answer that one. It's the PDF that's the particular problem.
Okay, well, I can live without the PDF if we do the HTML and the text.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I was thinking a few moments ago, oh, this is a dumb discussion. We're never going to get anywhere. I think we just did. As long as the RPC is generating the PDF from the HTML, if we actually believe that the HTML didn't change, if the PDF changes because of line breaks or page breaks, we don't care. Sorry, I've been one of the people who've never wanted us to be calling PDF an official format, and it sort of shows on the list. Sorry about that. But I'm with Eckert. If we can focus on tools for the HTML, then we can assume that the HTML to PDF conversion most likely went okay. And there's certainly some PDF tools that we can use that would flag massive differences and call them out. But if really the tools, if really what we're looking for is text and HTML, those are doable. I think the HTML is actually quite doable. And so at that point, I think we can stop. And if the RPC wants to test on the PDF, great, but that's not a requirement.
Okay, I think the community is pushing back on Jay, and we need to come up with a way to say that the level of testing, but this is acknowledging the way we're going, that we understand the tool chain, and testing the HTML is going to be a good step towards getting the PDF good enough. Alexis and then Jean.
I guess I'm wondering if someone is volunteering to find the HTML tool that says that we can in fact do this effectively. Otherwise, it shouldn't be a requirement in the document.
Jean?
So what I was hearing was PDF was just not that important. And PDF is what we do give to lawyers. And just want to call out that's what I'm hearing. So the RPC, if we have 3 publication formats or versions, we would want to ensure that they are all correct. If we decide that PDF is a second tier format that is supported best effort, I would like to hear that.
Robert?
So I'm happy that we've had the conversation about CI again, and I encourage that we continue to have it, but I don't see having it as a requirement that ends up in a document that is the output of this working group as an appropriate thing to do. You know, setting community expectations that the tool chains do the right thing is great. Talking about it is great, but I think that it falls outside the purview of the stream to tell the production center to tell the tool chain that you will go do this particular thing.
Eric?
Well, I certainly don't think it falls outside our purview. It's like clearly inside 9280. It's policy. So I mean, maybe it's a bad policy. Maybe we should make it, but I don't think it's like outside our purview in some cosmic sense. I guess I don't really understand, like, you know, the rule on the table right now is to do like, is there like no meaningful like automated verification. And so I'm proposing to do 2 kinds of automated verification for text and HTML. And surely that's better than doing none. And if that means PDF like without automated verification, I don't understand like how that, like, I mean, I guess I don't understand like Gene's point about like it's second class, but like everything was second class before if you had no identity verification. So I guess I don't really understand like what the objection to that is. As far as we get to lawyers, I think honestly, as Paul sort of indicated earlier, I think we're like waiting for indexing and we give to lawyers. Like we're not like we don't want to work for the lawyers. Our job is to hand them what they ask for, not to like spend a lot of time agonizing about exactly what they need.
Elliot, go ahead.
So forgive me, I'm sitting here typing minutes, and so I haven't had a chance to look at this exact text. It's not fresh in my head, but I'd like to understand the ramifications of the text in terms of what it means for changing existing RFCs. Is it that we have to do CI in order to make changes to the documents? Where this is just a point of informational question. Does this otherwise, let me put it in another way. Does this otherwise defeat the policy changes that we're incorporating in this document?
Can I answer that for you? So what it says in the document is that the ability to render to replace a publication version, to quote, creates a risk that the re-rendered documents change in unexpected ways when they are regenerated. This risk of unintentional change can be managed by implementing validation processes that are the ones that are then specified that we're talking about. So that's why it's there. I am surprised, like others, that we should get into that level of detail, even if it's only advice, in order for that.
So I'm hearing a plea for higher level. Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I clicked a little bit too soon. I thought, Russ, you were about to say we're close to the top of the hour. You didn't see anyone else in the queue. Are we done? If
That is not what I was saying, but I was about to move to that.
Okay. Sorry. Well, so let's assume that I didn't click quite as quickly and you just moved to that. Wearing my co-author's hat. So a bunch of people brought up stuff today, some of which was already on the list in some threads, some of which is new. Please open new thread. If what was said today is important to you, please open new threads. It's okay if the new thread is on the same topic as an old one, but given what has happened today, there's been a lot of discussion. I was not taking notes. I don't think that the authors doing something based on what was said verbally during a working group, much less an interim meeting, is appropriate. Please open threads. Let's have the threads come to completion. Any heavily contested threads, the chairs can, call consensus on. Please do that. And as threads get closed, as in, yep, we all agree on this, Heather and I can put in the document, but please don't continue old threads at this point, especially because a lot of the old threads actually just were, something about with the document name in the header. Please have subject lines that will alert somebody if they want to be following it or not. Thanks.
Well, now I'll observe we have less than 2 minutes. So is there any other business someone wants to spotlight for a topic on the mail list? If so, we can do that in a minute and then wrap up. Go ahead, Elliot.
Thanks, Russ. I really actually want to channel Miria for a moment. She put something out to the RSAB as I think an agenda item for the next meeting, but also probably for dialogue in the RSAB. And I think this is probably worth taking input from this group, which is, as this document is approved by this, as this document gets to group consensus, the RSAB has to figure out how to consult the community about that. And Miria asked for input on that point. I think it's probably good for us to give that some thought within this group and maybe feed that into the RSAB so that the RSAB, of which I include myself, is better informed in terms of how people feel. Thank you.
Could you start a thread on the mail list so you can get that feedback?
You bet.
All right. All right. Since we're now out of time, I want to thank everybody. I think we had a good dialogue. I think we made progress. And I think that we'll get an 05 very soon and continue the last call discussion with a heads up when we get to stable. All right. Thank you all. And thank you very much, Elliot, for taking notes. Thank you.
You're welcome.